Is your cruise line lying to you? Well, maybe not lying, but they very well may be stretching the truth when it comes to certain destinations. They might be listing amazing cities or sites that you can go see on your cruise itinerary. But believe it or not, your cruise ship may not actually be going there. But that's okay. We're going to talk about the top 13 of these, the unlucky 13, around the world that we've experienced and tell you how you can still have a good time. We just want you to be prepared in case these do show up and you're so excited to see them.
Welcome to Living Phase 2.
Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Nancy, and we're empty nesters striving to live life to the fullest.
And we are living that full life, sharing our best cruising hints, tips, tricks, and trickery by the cruise lines with you, our Phase 2 flock.
Yes, we are, friends. Now, friends, you may feel like you've got that perfect itinerary and you're going to see some wonderful things on your cruise. However, sometimes where the cruise docks at the port is nowhere near that special location that you want to go to. Now, we define an excessive distance away being at least a minimum of a 2-hour drive time. So the places that we're listing, you're going to dock, you're going to have to take an Uber or a car, a bus, a train,
a plane,
potentially a flight to get to these locations. So it means a lot of drive time going and coming, and then that can mean a limited amount of time at the special place that you want to go to. So, well, let's just go ahead and get into our list and you will see exactly what we mean.
Well, our first mystery port is the City of Lights, Paris, France.
Yes, now you're not docking in Paris, you're actually docking in Le Havre, which is about a 3-hour bus ride or a train ride to actually get into Paris. So that means 6 hours round trip. Now, you may look at Google and it may say it's only 2.5 hours, but remember, when your cruise is docking there in the morning and then it's leaving in the late afternoon, that can be rush hour traffic as well. And so we're going by our experience as far as how long it has taken us to get to these different destinations. One thing I'd also like to recommend is at these specific places that we're listing, do use the cruise excursions. Don't use third-party excursions where there's any risk of you being late to the ship. And we're going to explain why when we get to number 13. We've got a really good example there. 6 hours, that's a long time to be sitting and riding just to get into Paris. And then how much time are you really going to get in Paris anyway at that point?
Yeah, now in our particular case, the cruise lines understood this and they did overnight in Le Havre. So that did give people time to get off the ship, transit into Paris. Then a lot of people stayed in Paris overnight and then got up the next morning and then took the transportation back to the ship. So sometimes the cruise lines will account for this, but just be aware that that's all going to be on your own budget unless you are on a cruise line potentially like Viking or a very high-end like Silversea or something that might include some of that. But most of them, it's going to be on your own and it's going to be additional cost to get to that destination that's actually listed there on your itinerary.
And now number 2 was my absolute favorite destination on the Ultimate World Cruise, and that was Aguazu Falls.
Well, it is, but the problem you have here is, and again, anybody that's got a map, can certainly look at these. Most cruise ships will go into Buenos Aires, Argentina, but there you have to take an hour flight to get over near Aguazu Falls. Then you have to take a bus to Aguazu Falls, and then you have to tour. And so there actually are some day trips that do this. They leave super early in the morning. It is commando touring. You get to just barely see Aguazu Falls, and we'll reference this quite a few times. We call it the Clark Griswold at the Grand Canyon, where you just bob your head and it's there.
Don't you want to look at the Grand Canyon?
Great. But it's one of those things, it's not an enjoyable trip, right? Because there's so much travel time to get there. And so many variables. And that's what we're coming in to now is it's not just hopping on a bus and going somewhere. When you have to take a bus to a plane to a bus to a train or a trolley inside a park and then reverse all that, every one of those is a failure point that can make it more difficult for you to get back on time and to actually enjoy the things that you're seeing. When we went to Aguazu, we did a full overnight to where we saw both sides of the falls, the Argentinian and the Brazilian side. And we got about 3 hours sleep, and we had a hotel that we stayed in for about 2 to 3 hours. And then we got up in the morning and saw it at sunrise. So, this is one of those that absolutely spectacular, but it's not a destination that your cruise ship is just going to pull up to.
So one of the things we would recommend here, friends, is at these destinations, see if you can make them at the very beginning of your cruise or at the end of your cruise where you can stay an additional few nights and then really enjoy and appreciate them.
And our number 3 bad actor port is Machu Picchu, Cusco, Peru.
Well, here your cruise is going to dock either in Lima or Pisco. That's 1,000 kilometers, or you've got to take a flight here. You're going to take about an hour flight. This is one example where you just have to stay overnight here or have this at the beginning or ending of your cruise destination.
Yeah, and it's certainly a destination that I think everyone in the world would like to go see, but just realize that there really isn't a way to do this as a day trip. Somehow this is going to have to be a multi-day trip if you get down in there. And I like, Nancy, what you said. Try to make Lima the beginning or end of a cruise, and then you can actually make it to Machu Picchu and enjoy your time there.
And number 4 is now the Hobbiton Movie Set in New Zealand.
That's right. So now here your cruise ship is going to be docking in Auckland, New Zealand. Now I have to say this, I loved Aguazu Falls. This was also on my top 5, I think, or top 10 the places we went in the Ultimate World Cruise. I'm kind of a geek, and going to the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit movie set was just really cool. However, realize when your ship docks in Auckland, you've got a 2 to 3 hour drive in kind of back roads and Auckland traffic and everything to get there and get back. And our guide, when we took this tour, was very concerned about the traffic going back into Auckland. So our time was fairly limited at Hobbiton. Now, we had a good tour, don't get me wrong, and we actually did use a third-party tour in this case, but we had to time everything just right. We had to make sure it was there. And we did have our time cut a little short because he was watching the traffic in Auckland and it was getting really bad. There was some road construction. So, you're kind of limited. So if you're seeing, go see the Hobbiton Movie Set or go see the sights of Lord of the Rings and you're going into Auckland, just realize that you are going to be a little limited.
Now this is one destination where I actually didn't mind the long drive because it was beautiful, the rolling hills and the meadows, and it was very, very picturesque, and so I actually enjoyed this long ride.
And our 5th port that they may be fooling you on is Beijing, China.
Well, it's actually, you're not going to Beijing, you're going to dock at Tianjin, and that's going to be about a 2 to 3 hour drive into Beijing. So you're going to want to see things like the Great Wall, the Forbidden City. The Forbidden City is going to take you probably about 4 hours to walk through all of that.
If you're running through it.
So there's a lot to see and do in Beijing, and so you're spending a lot of time on a car or on a bus to get there.
Yeah, once again, this is a perfect example where if your cruise can start or stop there, or if your cruise line will overnight there. Now, ours happened to overnight, and so we did it in one day, but we left early in the morning and we didn't get back to our cruise ship until 1 a.m. and we saw the Great Wall and the Forbidden City and had lunch. And those are the 3 things we did in almost 16 to 18 hours of touring. It was quite the day. So just be prepared for that. If you have Beijing, China on your cruise itinerary, it's actually Tianjin, and there's a lot of travel there.
It was actually nice. Royal Caribbean kept the Windjammer open for us at 1 a.m. in the morning to feed us. We were hungry at that point.
They did.
And number 6 are the port wineries in the Douro Valley of Portugal.
That's right. So you may be thinking, oh, it's port, we're going to Porto, Portugal. I get to see all these port wineries and go tour them and do all of that. Well, you're your cruise ship is actually going to dock in Porto, or actually the cruise ship is called, and I hope my Portuguese is terrible, Le Choice, it looks like Lexos or something, is where your cruise ship's actually going to dock. But if you want to go to the amazing Douro Valley, which we did, it is a long drive, anywhere from 2 to 3 hours to get there. Again, through beautiful countryside and rolling hills and the Douro River Valley, and the port wineries were amazing. But realize you are going to have quite a drive to get, from the cruise port to actually get into the wineries.
I hope this is one place we can go back to and do a riverboat cruise, because it is beautiful, friends.
Yes. And our 7th bad actor, and this was a bad one, is Chichinita, Mexico.
Okay, you're not docking near Chichen Itza. You are docking in Cozumel, Mexico. It is a 4-hour trip at best. You've got a little bus ride to get to a ferry. The ferry could be on really kind of rough seas. And then once you get to, that ferry's going to take you to Playa del Carmen. Once you get there, you've got another 2 to 2.5 hour bus ride to get to Chichen Itza. When we were there on the World Cruise, first off, it was very, very hot. The water was very, very rough. People were losing their lunch on the little ferry ride. and then our ferry ride lost power. At this point, it was dark outside. It was a long day. It was just bobbing around there out in the middle of the ocean,
right between
with
the
no
mainland
power.
and Cozumel. It was crazy.
That was a little unnerving. But this is a really long trip. And even on the World Cruise, this was one of our included 7 World Wonder excursions. We were rushed. We got to Chichen Itza, and it was a very rush tour on this one.
Yeah, and now cruise lines do offer this tour as a standard tour, when you dock into Cozumel. And as Nancy said, it is a long day. They pretty much rush you off the ship, they get you over to the ferry, and they go through everything we just talked about. And then you get back and you see very little. I mean, Chichen Itza is cool. Don't get me wrong. It's an amazing sight to go see, and one of the wonders of the world. But we would recommend, if you're going to do, let's say a resort in Cancun or something of that nature, that's going to be a much better alternative for you to go see Chichen Itza than taking a cruise to Cozumel and then a ferry and doing all this stuff. It is really, we feel it's really too far to try to do that all in one day. And certainly if you're going to do it through the cruise line, so that you're the quote unquote guaranteed to get back to the ship.
The one thing I do want to say, that because you were saying how cool it was, which it was very cool. I don't want to discourage any of you from seeing these locations. This may be your one and only opportunity to get to some of these places. So if you only get there for an hour or 2 hours, a very short period of time, at least you've gotten there, and you can check that one off your bucket list. And so I don't want to discourage you, but yet just consider and be aware of the travel time it's going to take if you're on a cruise and trying to get to these locations.
I agree with you 100% that, nothing we're saying should ever discourage anyone.
Right.
In fact, we want to encourage you to travel. And, if you're interested what these look like, you can always go back. If you haven't seen some of our videos, you can go back. We documented all of these on the Ultimate World Cruise. Well, I think most of them probably see them because, how could they not have seen them, right?
Because you will have subscribed. Thanks, friends. I tell you every time, we appreciate you so much for hitting the like button, for subscribing to the channel. It means the world to us, and we truly mean that from the bottom of our heart.
Yeah, especially if this is your first time here, you found this video as you're trying to plan some different cruises. Go ahead and subscribe and see about all our other empty nest adventures around the world.
And now at number 8, we have Venice, Italy.
Yeah, here you're probably going to go into Ravenna. Now there are a couple different cruise ports that cruise ships can go into to visit Venice. It's getting much more difficult though. Venice is pushing those way out. They're trying to actually eliminate the day tours that go in. And Ravenna is at least 2 to 2.5 hour drive away. And that's just to get to the edge of the city. Then you've got to, of course, walk through Venice and do all the things there. Again, you're going to have a very limited time in Venice as you're trying to enjoy this amazing city. And to me, Venice is a city that you want to go overnight. There's nothing like, strolling the narrow little alleyways and streets and, and yes, it's very touristy and, kitschy, but, take a gondola ride, but do it at night when, all of the day tourists have left. That's a great time to see this. So again, if your cruise ship is going to overnight here in Venice, or many of them will actually start or end their tour in Venice, get that extra day on the front or back end so that you can actually book a hotel and enjoy Venice.
That was a very special stop for us.
And our 9th faraway port is Florence, Italy.
Well, here, friends, you're going to dock in Carrara, Italy. Now, it's a 1-hour drive to Pisa, but it's an additional hour, so 2 hours to get to Florence. Many of your excursions will include both Pisa and Florence, both of those. So you're talking 2 hours there and 2 hours back.
Now, we've lived in Europe, so fortunately we got to come in on the other side. We've stayed there on the land side. And Florence is really a city you don't want to rush. I'd say from Pisa, an hour shore excursion, if you just want to go see the Leaning Tower and get that picture with, your hand up there like you're pretending to hold it up, that's not a bad trip from Carrara. But, certainly Florence is a town that, it deserves more than a quick stop. Most of the cruise tours that are going to go there are going to run in, see the Statue of David, see the Basilica, a couple of things, and then run back because that's all they have time for. You owe it to yourself to see a little bit more of Florence than that.
And in the number 10 spot is Saigon, Vietnam.
Yeah, this one was classic. We haven't said it too much, but if you go back and look at this video, it was just crazy. We ended up with only 3 hours to tour all of Saigon. Now that is just not doable. I mean, we did the top things we had on our list, but we spent 3 hours each way. Now here's a great example. If you just look on Google, it'll say that the port Phu Mai, which is where the cruise lines will dock at, is only 40 minutes from Saigon. It's not. It's 3 hours, especially with traffic, with everything, with getting into where they drop you off and pick you up. So by the time we did this, it was 3 hours in. We had exactly 3 hours to tour in Saigon, where we got to, see a little bit of the market. We got to have a banh mi sandwich, which was awesome. We got to just see some of the sights, and then we had to run back. And then 3 hours all the way back to ship. So in a 9-hour tour, we got 3 hours of touring. This is a great example where cruise ships aren't the best way to see this particular town.
Well, and this was one stop on the cruise ship. I didn't like it. And I think part of the reason I didn't like Saigon is just because we had such a short period of time here, because what little we did see of it. It wasn't pleasant by any means because it was so crowded. I honestly was scared to death of getting hit by a motorcycle or a moped because the traffic was beyond insanity. Just driving and trying to get across the street, and I was just a nervous wreck.
Well, and part of it was we were like watching our clock. We got to run. We got to get here. We got to get there. Yeah.
They've got motorcycles and mopeds on the sidewalk, and so. Yeah, it was not relaxing by any stretch of the imagination.
And coming in at the number 11 spot is one we just came back from on the land side of things, and that's the Great Pyramids of Egypt in Cairo.
Well, here your cruise ship is going to dock in Alexandria. It's going to be at least a 2.5-hour drive. And like I mentioned in Saigon, with the traffic being so bad, it's horrible here too. Now, if you followed along with us on the Ultimate World Cruise, we were originally supposed to go into Alexandria, but because of the fighting and the discontentment there, they ended up rerouting our cruise ship all the way around to Africa. Let me tell you, friends, multiple times I have said to Mike, this was a blessing in disguise that we did not make it to the pyramids while on the world cruise, because we got to spend 2 weeks in Jordan and Egypt. I got to see an incredible number of tombs and temples and relics and just the pyramids, the Sphinx, everything. And I got to see it at my own pace. And it was an absolutely fabulous trip that we were able to take on the land side of things by taking our time.
Hey Nancy, what are you thinking right now?
This is so freaking awesome. This is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, our guide even said, we had a private guide the whole time we were there. He was with us the whole time we were in Egypt. And he said he does these cruise ship excursions. And we were standing in front of the Great Pyramid of Khufu. And he said, you guys are so lucky. He goes, I work with the cruise ship passengers and I get up to Alexandria, I grab them, we get on a bus, we drive down here, we get a few minutes at a few different sites, and then I have to get them back on the bus and drive them back up to the cruise ship. He goes, it is a long and just rush day. And really, we will tell you that the pyramids deserve so much more. The different tombs, the different places that you can go see, you will really shortchange yourself. Now, we will say this again, that we, without repeating ourselves too much, if you're on a cruise ship that's stopping in Alexandria and you have not had an opportunity to see the pyramids, absolutely, 100%
Yes.
go do it. It's just that, we are letting you know that there's a lot of travel time that's kind of wasted to get to the pyramids.
And number 12 brings us back to Italy, the city of Rome.
That's right, the eternal city, but it's an eternal drive to get in there. No, actually, again, this is a great example where Google will tell you it's only like an hour from Civitavecchia, the port where your cruise ship will go into Rome. That's if traffic conditions are perfect and not necessarily getting into the heart of Rome, where you're going to want to see, the Colosseum and the Forum and all of the different, plazas and piazzas and, the Trevi Fountain. I mean, again, you can hear it. Rome has these amazing things to go see, and you can spend days and days and days. And if you're on a cruise ship, this is a perfect example. A lot of cruises will actually start or stop in Venice and start or stop in Civitavecchia or Rome. So we would really recommend trying not to rush a day trip into Rome, but really try to do this on the front or the back end of your cruise, because you can get stuck in traffic and you're going to be really rushed to see the eternal city. It's another one that really deserves a lot of your time.
We did do a day tour here through Royal Caribbean. It was one of their excursions, one of their world wonders that we got to see. But it was a rush trip, and we got back to the ship late at night.
And our last unlucky 13 cruise port that you're not actually going to be going to is Berlin, Germany.
Well, and you're not going to dock here. You're going to dock in Warnemünde. And this is going to be a 2 to 3 hour trip to get to Berlin. Most people take the train. It's going to take just as long if you take a car or a bus. But on the World Cruise, that train was running late. And it was time for the ship to leave. But there were hundreds of passengers on that train that had to get back to the ship. Thankfully, the ship waited for them. I mean, your cruise ship does not want to leave. It doesn't want to leave a single passenger, but it certainly didn't want to leave hundreds of passengers.
Yeah, this is a great case where, fortunately, there were people who had private tours or just hopped on the train, on their own with no tour, mixed in with a lot of Royal Caribbean passengers, so that the cruise ship kind of had to wait. But, let's talk about that just a little bit. I think this is a good piece of information. As Nancy said, your cruise ship never wants to leave you, even if you're a solo passenger. But there are several reasons why your cruise ship may have to leave you if you're stuck at one of these distant ports quite a ways away. The first is tides. Quite often with these ports, there's very specific times those cruise ships can go in or out of these ports. And as the tide comes in or out, they reach a certain point where they don't have a choice. They have to pull in the ropes and get out because they can't be in port at that time.
Well, we were on, where was the destination? Going under the bridge, and they had to time it perfectly. That we had to go across at low tide so that our ship would fit under the bridge, because had it have been high tide, we wouldn't have fit.
Yeah, exactly. Another reason is simply the port workers that have to come out and untie you to let you off. They may have a contract that says they only work till 5 o'clock, and at 5 o'clock they leave, and if your ship isn't out of there, it's stuck.
Another thing is cost, too. They can charge those cruise ships by the minute for every minute that they're still in port.
Another is the distance to the next port. These itineraries, they have to get from where you're at now to the next port. And if it's a long distance, they may have to get out at a very specific time so that they can get there at the proper speed to the next port.
And the last reason that we're aware of is that another ship may have the berth or the port location where your ship is docked. They may have that one reserved and they're ready to come in and dock. And so they've got their passengers they want to get off. So there's a variety of reasons why your ship may not wait for you. But like we said, they don't want to leave you. The captain finds no joy in leaving any of the passengers by any means.
Well, thanks a lot for joining us here. This wraps up our cruise destinations that aren't really cruise destinations at all. But we hope it's been enjoyable and helpful as you're planning all your different cruise adventures around the world.
All right, friends, we will see you very soon. Have a beautiful day. Take care. Bye-bye now.